Parent, I really appreciate it. And I don't think it's about support or not support of the equity pledge. I think, once again, it's about the process. And this is what sows those seeds of a divide. The beginning of the equity process didn't include educators. It didn't include parents or community members. Now that we're in the second phase, we're going to include folks. But on the front end, when we're beginning the equity pledge, the very foundations of that equity pledge, we need to have everybody at the table. All of our policies need to be rooted in an inclusiveness of all experiences. Parents, educational leaders from district and charter schools, our administrators, and even our students. So I want to make sure that we have an inclusive process, because I know that in OUSD, our charter schools suspend black students 3.5 times more than a district school will suspend a black student. I work with our reentry population. I'm a social worker. I know that if a student is suspended from an OUSD school, charter or district, they have a 1 in 4 chance of just dropping out and never returning again. If they drop out, they have a 1 in 3 chance of having contact with the criminal justice system. And once you have contact with the criminal justice system, your options are very limited. That is what is called the school to prison pipeline. I want to make sure we stop that. We have to stop our suspensions and willful defiance, not just in district schools, but also in charter schools. We have to stop, removing our students because they don't have great test scores. If they don't have great test scores, it's not a failing of that student. That's a failing of our educational system. So I agree with the equity pledge, but it needs to be much more inclusive of voices that were not at the table at the beginning. As a board member, I do hold, responsibility for our charter schools. Like you said, we have 12,000 students that are in charter schools. But I also know that 24 out of our 37 OUSD charter schools are failing state standards, either in math or in English. Now, I respect autonomy, but what do I say to a parent who comes to me and asks, do I have tutoring services? Is there anything that I can do? Parents, this is a false debate. Parents aren't sitting at the kitchen table. There's my wife right there. We don't sit at the kitchen table about my daughter who's going to kindergarten talking about, I hope that school has autonomy. We go to our schools and we sit at our kitchen tables at our homes and we ask, is that school safe? Does that school have creativity and engage my daughter creatively? Does that school have rigorous standards and high achievement? Is it diverse? Does it have curriculum that's infused with our experiences as Latino and African American parents? That's what we ask what our schools have. And so yes, I see some responsibility over our charters, because I want to ensure that every school, no matter what zip code a child lives in, has that experience, has the experience that I got at Oakland schools. So I will make sure that we're actively engaged in our charter schools and make sure that, yes, respecting their autonomy, but autonomy can't trump results. It can't trump actual outcomes for our students. And if our charter school is failing, then they shouldn't be renewed. Just like if a district school is failing, we need to work to rebuild it and make it better. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Cesar.
Good morning, Cesar.
Good morning.
I'm a parent, educator, community organizer with Oakland. I'm also a LCAP member, District 3. So, as a board member, one of the most important jobs will be to evaluate the performance of the superintendent. We know that speaking directly about superintendent's performance review publicly will be a violation of confidentiality proceeding from board members. So, without speaking about the current superintendent, what actions will you take as a board member to ensure that the superintendent has a scope of work that is high, clear, and achievable? After you have taken those actions, what information would you need to know in order to understand whether the superintendent is effective? 5 minutes.
So, first, I just want to say I respect our superintendent and his pledge for equity and wanting every student to thrive educationally in our schools. I respect that. But once again, I look at our budget and don't tell me your values. Show me the budget and I'll show you where your values are. When we talk about student supports and having those student supports cut, we went from a $643 million budget to...
Okay, interrupt just for a second. I want to keep it away from the current superintendent, because the current superintendent may or may not be there, and when you're sitting as a board member, and so we want to learn more about your philosophy, about governance and roles and goals.
Oh, I was getting there. I was getting there. Let me.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, man, it might be Saturday, but man, I want a Sunday preach. So let me get to it. So when we talk about those values and when we talk about that budget, we need a process. So when we look, if elected and if we do have a new superintendent or a current superintendent, I want to make sure that we have a real role for our board as a policy-making board. We haven't had committees in a decade. That's insane. Everything that goes in policy goes straight to the board, the regular board meeting. There are no committees, no way for our board members to dive deep into the policies. That affects our relationship with our superintendent. That decreases the knowledgeability of our school board members, and it makes us not equal partners with our superintendent. So in order to make sure that we have an equitable and respectful and positive relationship, I want to make sure that we have processes like committee meetings. I chaired a budget committee meeting. I sat on our operations committee. I also was part of our student services committee. I made sure that we knew, our board members on the community college board, we knew what was going on before. We had deep dives into policy before we even got to the board meeting. So a lot of the divisiveness and the frustration of everyone involved really happens because there's a lack of a standard process to process policy. So in terms of that kind of a relationship, I want to change it a little bit. And I want to make sure that the board has the tools it needs to step up and be a real policy-making board that supports our educators, our students, and our parents and families in OUSD. But I also want to get back to our budget. Our budget is a policy. It is a byproduct of when you don't have a real process. When you have a budget that's made with just staff and not community, families, parents, and board members part of it. That's where you see disinvestments in our student support services, like for our English language learners and all over our district. That's when you see disinvestments in our East Oakland Flatland schools and our West Oakland schools. That's where you see a budget that goes from $643 million to $790 million that chose to disinvest in these schools. These kids need it the most. McClymonds lost more than $1,000 per pupil in spending, but yet we increased our budget to $790 million. If we had a budget committee and we had a thorough process and a relationship that was built on mutual, accountability, we would be able as board members to talk about that, to stop it, and to reform it and to revise it. And I want to develop that relationship with our superintendent where it's not combative, but it's an informative, and we're helping hold each other accountable. Because when we all fight, it's the students that lose. It's our families that lose. So I'm not interested in any ideological fights. I just want to make sure that we all have what we want in our educational system. Thank you.
Chris, hi. My name is Alex Bernadotte. I'm from Beyond 12. I just want to follow up on that question just to get a better sense from you as to what makes an effective superintendent. So I want to sort of get to that question a little bit more, which is the second part of the question that we asked.
In terms of an effective superintendent, a superintendent that, has a relationship with our board, and it's a two-way relationship. one that respects the board's role as a policy-making board, and a superintendent that, enthusiastically implements the policies that the board passes. I think that is what makes a wonderful superintendent. I enjoyed a wonderful relationship with our chancellor at our community college board. I worked closely to make sure that our black and brown students got the student support services they need. I worked closely to bring Gateway to College program to City College. I'm proud of, I couldn't have done that without a wonderful relationship with our chancellor. Our chancellor was rooted in the Third World Liberation Strike at SF State. He had been in a fight to create ethnic studies at SF State. I knew his values, and those values were mine. I know this superintendent or any superintendent's values, and I want to make sure that those are the same values, and that when we pass policies, we have such a close relationship that there's no question about the implementation part of it. And I want to make sure that only happens if we're an informed policy-making board. We only support our educators and our school sites when we're an informed, educated board. When we're not informed and we don't really make policy like we've been doing for the last 10 years, we get disinvestments. Not malicious disinvestments. I don't think any board member went out to do this, but they didn't look at it. They didn't have the time to digest it. And that's what I want, is make sure that we have an equal cooperative relationship that's built on unity and built on cooperation, and we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for coming out on Saturday morning. We just want to give you a couple of 2 minutes to do a quick closing statement, just to kind of use the time as you will.
All right. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Folks here, our parents, teachers, this is your summer break. You're here. We know you guys are the dedicated folks. I'm here because, I care about my son. My son his name is Little Denzel. I don't know where he is. But my daughter's name is Michaela. They live at 94605. That's our zip code. I want to make sure that every student in every single zip code has a great opportunity to have a high quality education from a public school. I want to make sure that our schools are accountable and held to the same standards. I want to make sure that we invest in our schools that need the most. That creates the equity that we strive for. I want to make sure that we make investments in our vocational education, because we only have about a 19 to 20% college going rate among OUSD students. That leaves 81% of students who leave Oakland Unified with influx. I want to make sure that we have strong vocational education to give our students a skill in their trade so that they can continue to live here in Oakland and work here in Oakland. I want to make investments in supporting our teachers through mentorship and professional development, and make sure that they feel wanted, loved, and supported in our school system. I also want to make sure that our budget makes real investments and not disinvestments in our school sites. And I want to also respect the autonomy, but I also want to make sure the board is inclusive in our decision-making process. And lastly, this is my personal project, will be to make sure we have universal preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds. No matter what age and income bracket you're in, every 3 and 4-year-old deserves a fresh head start in their educational journey. We know that no matter what debate we have, the greatest indicator of whether a student's going to succeed or not is whether they went to a high-quality preschool. And I want to make sure that that's a universal access point for every single student that lives in Oakland and calls it home. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I hope to earn your support this November. Thank you so much. Take care.